In the heat of a Jamaican noon, a young boy from the countryside moves to Kingston with nothing but his voice and dreams. He adopts the name Jimmy Cliff, and over 6 decades he becomes one of the architects of reggae, the music of hope, resistance, and love. He breaks through with songs like Many Rivers to Cross and You Can Get It If You Really Want, and even stars in the landmark film The Harder They Come, becoming at once cultural icon and voice for the oppressed. On November 24, 2025 he died at the age of 81 following a seizure and pneumonia. His story is one of struggle and triumph, of a music that traveled the world, and of a man whose message still echoes. Stay with us as we journey through 5 chapters of his remarkable life. The day began like any other in rural Jamaica. The sun hung heavy in the sky, sending heat shimmering across the cane fields. In the distance, the faint echo of church hymns mixed with the chatter of villagers, the rhythms of life that seemed ordinary but carried whispers of possibility. Under a mango tree, a boy named James Chambers sat, his small fingers tapping an invisible drum, his lips humming the melodies he had heard drifting through the village. Little did anyone know this boy carried a voice that would one day move the world. Born on July 30, 1944, in St. James Parish, James grew up in a world both vibrant and fraught. Jamaica was a land of color and song, yet of hardship and struggle. He moved through the alleys and markets of his hometown with wide-eyed curiosity, absorbing every sound, the laughter of children, the call of street vendors, the soulful strains of early ska drifting from battered radios. Music was his refuge, his constant companion. It was there he first dreamed of a life beyond the small town, a life where his voice could speak, inspire, and ignite. When James was still young, his father moved the family to Kingston. The city was alive with energy, but it was also a place of contrast. Narrow streets bustled with people, cars honked, street vendors hawked their goods, and the air was heavy with the scent of salt from the nearby sea. Kingston held secrets in its shadows, and dreams in its sunlit squares. For James, it was a world that promised opportunity and demanded resilience. He was a small boy with a big voice, and he wasted no time trying to make it heard. He knocked on doors, wandered into recording studios, and befriended musicians who would become lifelong collaborators. Every rejection became fuel, every setback a lesson. At school, he carried his notebooks filled with lyrics, scribbled in the margins between classes. He dreamed not just of singing but of creating a sound that could transcend boundaries, a rhythm that could unite people in hope and defiance. By his teenage years, his perseverance bore fruit. His early songs, like Hurricane Hattie, began to capture attention. The young singer was raw, unpolished, but there was something magnetic in his tone, a clarity of heart and purpose that could not be taught. And yet, despite these early successes, life was never simple. Colonial legacies, economic hardships, and social barriers loomed over him like shadows, threatening to dim the light he carried. He witnessed poverty, injustice, and struggle all around him, and it seeped into his music. Every note, every lyric, became a testament to resilience. It was in these years that he also discovered the power of determination. He learned that music was not just entertainment, it was a voice for the voiceless, a weapon against despair, and a beacon of hope. He understood the weight of storytelling, that each song could capture a story, a moment, an emotion that could touch hearts across oceans. And so, he poured himself into his art with relentless passion, shaping not just a career, but a legacy in the making. In the shadows of Kingston, James Chambers began to transform. He shed the boyhood name and adopted a new identity, Jimmy Cliff. The name would become synonymous with struggle and triumph, with rebellion and joy, with a music that could break chains and cross borders. He was a dreamer, yes, but also a fighter, aware that the path he had chosen was as treacherous as it was bright. Jimmy's story is not just about talent, it is about resilience, vision, and heart. It is about a young boy who refused to be invisible, who sought a voice in a world that often tried to silence him. And it is about a city, a country, and ultimately a world that would one day listen, spellbound, to the sound he carried from a mango tree in St. James to the stages of the globe. Because Jimmy Cliff believed, and lived, the truth of his own lyrics. You can get it if you really want it. But the journey would demand courage, persistence, and a heart unafraid of the storms ahead. In the next chapter we will follow Jimmy as he ignites reggae's global flame, navigating fame, struggle, and the moments that defined him as a cultural icon. Thank you for joining us in this story. Your presence here helps keep these stories alive. Subscribe, share, and support this channel. Together we can honor legends, explore truths, and let the music and the stories echo far beyond these walls. Your attention, your love, and your belief mean more than words can say. The streets of Kingston were alive, but they were also unforgiving. The sun baked the asphalt, the scent of sea salt mixed with smoke from cooking fires, and the air vibrated with music, ambition, and tension. Young Jimmy Cliff, barely a teenager, navigated this world with wide eyes and a restless heart. Every corner hid possibility, or peril. Every alley echoed with rhythms that would shape his future. By the early 1960s, Jimmy had begun to find his voice. Not just the sound of a singer but the soul of a storyteller. He recorded his first singles and performed wherever he could, street corners, local halls, and small clubs. People began to notice the clarity and power in his voice, a tone that could carry both joy and sorrow in the same breath. For a boy who had arrived in Kingston with little more than hope, this was the first sign that destiny was taking notice. But fame did not come easily. The music industry in Jamaica was rough, competitive, and often exploitative. Young artists were caught between ambition and survival. Jimmy learned early that talent alone was not enough. Determination, strategy, and resilience were just as important. He knocked on the doors of producers, recording studios, and music executives, often facing rejection, sometimes ridicule. Yet each no fueled him. Each setback became a lesson, sharpening his voice, honing his artistry, and deepening his empathy for the struggles around him. It was during these formative years that he also discovered the transformative power of music. Songs like Kingston Town and Hurricane Hattie were not just melodies. They were statements, reflections of a society grappling with poverty, injustice, and hope. Jimmy's music became a mirror for Jamaica itself, raw, honest, and alive. Audiences responded. The city began to hum with the sound of his songs. Then came the moment that would define his trajectory. In 1972, Jimmy starred in The Harder They Come, a film that introduced reggae to the world and cemented his place as a cultural icon. On screen he portrayed Ivanhoe Martin, a musician who battled corruption, poverty, and exploitation, a reflection of the very struggles Jimmy had known. The film's impact was immediate. Audiences worldwide were drawn not just to the music, but to the story, the human truth embedded in every scene. Jimmy's voice, both cinematic and musical, had become a conduit for hope, resistance, and identity. Success, however, was not without sacrifice. International tours, grueling recording sessions, and constant travel tested his body and spirit. Jimmy faced the challenges of being a global figure while remaining true to his roots. Yet through it all, he never lost sight of the message that had carried him from a mango tree in St. James to stages across the globe. Music could heal, inspire, and awaken. Behind the bright lights and acclaim, Jimmy remained a man shaped by his past, humble, reflective, and deeply connected to his people. He championed justice through his songs, often blending personal stories with social commentary. He reminded listeners that life's struggles were universal, yet surmountable, and that joy could coexist with pain. By the mid-1970s, Jimmy Cliff was no longer just a musician. He had become a symbol, a beacon for generations seeking voice and identity. He toured Europe, the United States, and Africa, bringing reggae to audiences who had never heard such rhythm, such honesty, such humanity. Every stage was a new battle, every song a bridge between worlds. Yet for all the fame, Jimmy never forgot where he came from. Kingston streets, its music, its hardships, they were etched into his songs. Every note carried the sweat, the laughter, and the resilience of the city that had raised him. And every performance was an act of tribute, not just to his journey, but to the countless lives that shaped him along the way. It was in this era that Jimmy's music became immortal. Tracks like Many Rivers to Cross, You Can Get It If You Really Want, and Wonderful World, Beautiful People transcended boundaries. They were sung, danced to, and revered across continents. He had become more than a singer. He had become a voice of hope, a bridge between cultures, a living testament to perseverance. And yet, even as the world celebrated him, Jimmy remained grounded. He knew that the story was never just about fame, it was about struggle, love, and purpose. Every high note, every lyric, every applause was a reminder of the journey, the roots that had carried him this far, and the responsibility of using his voice to inspire. The rise of Jimmy Cliff was not instantaneous. It was a mosaic of small victories, relentless effort, and a profound connection to humanity. And as he moved from the streets of Kingston to the global stage, he carried with him the dreams of a boy who once sat under a mango tree, listening to the world and daring to imagine that his voice could change it. By the late 1970s, Jimmy Cliff had become more than a musician. He was a phenomenon, a symbol, a voice that could travel across oceans and speak to hearts far removed from the streets of Kingston where he had grown up. His music resonated not only because of its rhythm but because of its soul, its honesty, its humanity. Every note carried the weight of experience, the pain of struggle, and the hope of redemption. The world took notice. Reggae, once confined to the clubs and sound systems of Jamaica, now reached arenas in Europe, stadiums in the United States, and concert halls across Africa. Jimmy's voice was everywhere, a bridge connecting cultures, a hymn for those searching for identity, and a call to action for those longing for justice. Many rivers to cross, you can get it if you really want, and the harder they come soundtrack became more than songs. They became anthems of resilience, endurance, and belief in oneself. Collaborations with legendary artists only amplified his reach. On stage, he shared moments with global icons, weaving his sound into a tapestry of music that transcended borders. Each performance was a masterclass in storytelling, a blend of laughter, sorrow, defiance, and joy. Audiences were mesmerized, not just by the music but by the authenticity of the man behind it. Jimmy Cliff had the rare ability to connect intimately with thousands of strangers simultaneously, making each listener feel as if the song was meant just for them. Yet fame brought its own trials. The demands of constant touring, the scrutiny of the media, and the pressure to maintain relevance tested his resolve. There were nights of exhaustion, moments of doubt, and times when the world's applause felt distant from the boy who once sat under a mango tree dreaming. But Jimmy never allowed the challenges to dilute his message. Every stage, every studio session, every interview became a reaffirmation of purpose. Music could heal, inspire, and transform. Jimmy's work during this era also reflected a deep awareness of social issues. He sang about freedom, struggle, and hope, themes that resonated across continents where oppression and inequality persisted. His music became both mirror and compass, reflecting the realities of society while guiding listeners toward resilience and courage. Songs were not just entertainment, they were lessons, reminders, and motivators. Through melody and lyric, he educated, uplifted, and challenged. While the world celebrated Jimmy, he remained profoundly connected to Jamaica. Despite the allure of global fame, he never forgot the streets that had raised him, the friends who had supported him, or the culture that had shaped his music. Every visit home, every performance in Kingston, every collaboration with local artists was a tribute to his roots. He carried the spirit of the city with him, ensuring that reggae was never just a genre but a movement, a voice for those often unheard. And yet, his story was not just one of triumph. Behind the accolades were moments of reflection, of vulnerability. Jimmy often spoke of the sacrifices he had made, the personal costs of success, and the weight of carrying expectations, both his own and those of a world that had embraced him as its voice. But even in those quiet moments he found inspiration, drawing strength from the people he served through his music and the legacy he continued to build. By the end of the decade, Jimmy Cliff had become timeless. His songs would echo in classrooms, on radios, in films, and across the streets of cities far removed from Jamaica. He was no longer merely an artist, he was an institution. And yet, through it all, the warmth, humility, and humanity that had defined him from the start remained intact. He had become a global voice, but he was still the boy who listened under a mango tree, imagining that one day the world might listen too. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. Your attention, your love, and your respect for stories like Jimmy's help this channel grow. Subscribe, share, and stay with us. Together we'll celebrate legends, keep memories alive, and allow the music to echo in hearts everywhere. Your presence here is a gift and we honor it. The sun over Kingston may have shifted, but the music of Jimmy Cliff never waned. As decades passed, the boy who had once sat under a mango tree had become a man whose voice carried across continents, whose songs had etched themselves into the hearts of millions, and whose name had become synonymous with reggae itself. Yet time did not make his journey easier, it only deepened the responsibility he felt toward his music, his message, and the generations who followed. Even in his later years, Jimmy remained relentless. He continued to record, tour, and perform, bringing new energy to his songs and collaborating with younger artists who admired him. Each note he sang was more than a performance, it was a lesson in perseverance, an example of dedication, and a bridge between the past and the present. He carried with him the authenticity that had defined his early career, refusing to dilute his artistry to fit trends or expectations. Jimmy's influence stretched far beyond the stage. Filmmakers, activists, and musicians looked to him as a source of inspiration. His work in The Harder They Come remained a cultural landmark, studied, referenced, and revered. Through interviews and public appearances, he became a storyteller not just of his own life, but of the struggles, triumphs, and resilience of the Jamaican people. He was a living archive, a voice that preserved the history of a people while offering hope for the future. Challenges remained, of course. Health concerns, the weight of global expectations, and the pressure to continually reinvent oneself could have dimmed a lesser artist. But Jimmy approached these moments with the same determination that had defined his early years. Every setback was met with resilience, every obstacle a reminder of why he had begun this journey in the first place, to give voice to the voiceless, to spread joy, and to remind the world that dreams, no matter how improbable, could be realized. Even as he aged, Jimmy's energy on stage never waned. Concerts became celebrations of life itself. Audiences sang along to every lyric, danced to every beat, and felt the pulse of a man whose music was inseparable from his spirit. And behind the scenes, he mentored younger musicians, sharing the lessons of decades: how to navigate an industry often cruel, how to balance fame with integrity, and how to remain true to one's roots while reaching for the stars. His later years were also a period of reflection. He looked back on the boy who had arrived in Kingston with nothing but hope, on the struggles that had shaped him, and on the milestones that had defined his career. And in these reflections he found purpose. His life was not simply about fame or accolades, it was about impact. It was about the lives touched, the hearts moved, and the inspiration passed on to future generations. Jimmy Cliff's story in this era was one of continuity and evolution. His music remained timeless, but his message matured. It was a testament to resilience, humanity, and the enduring power of art. Every album, every song, every performance was a thread in the tapestry of a life dedicated to storytelling, expression, and connection. And yet, through all the applause, recognition, and awards, Jimmy remained humble. He never lost sight of the streets that had raised him, the struggles that had forged him, or the people who had believed in him from the beginning. He understood that true legacy is measured not by fame, but by the hearts one touches, the lives one inspires, and the love one leaves behind. Chapter 4 is a reminder: greatness is not merely achieved, it is nurtured, sustained, and shared. Jimmy Cliff's life was proof that music could carry a person beyond boundaries, eras, and challenges, but it is the heart behind the music that endures. The sun sets over Kingston, casting golden light across the city that shaped him, the streets that heard his first dreams, and the people who carried his music in their hearts. Jimmy Cliff, the boy who once tapped rhythms under a mango tree, has left a legacy that will resonate for generations. On November 24, 2025, the world bid farewell to a legend, but his songs, his spirit, and his message endure, unbroken, timeless, and alive. From the first notes of Hurricane Hattie to the global anthems that defined reggae, Jimmy's music was more than entertainment. It was a lifeline, a voice for the oppressed, a source of hope for the weary. He sang of struggle, love, resistance, and triumph, universal themes that transcended geography, language, and era. Each lyric carried the authenticity of a man who had lived the stories he told. Each melody reflected a soul attuned to the world's beauty and its suffering. Through decades of fame, Jimmy remained grounded. He never lost sight of the humble streets of Kingston or the dreams that had driven him as a boy. His work was a bridge, connecting people, cultures, and generations. Musicians, fans, and storytellers around the world drew inspiration from his journey, reminded that true artistry is rooted in honesty, courage, and heart. Even as his voice aged, it carried the same power, the same resonance, the same emotional truth. Every note, every chord, every chorus was a reminder of resilience, of perseverance, of the endless rivers we all must cross. And as we remember Jimmy Cliff, we celebrate not only a musical icon but a man who dedicated his life to uplifting others, reminding us that we all have the capacity to dream, to rise, and to inspire. His legacy is immortal. His music will continue to echo in classrooms, concert halls, and radios. It will be sung at celebrations, protests, and quiet moments of reflection. Every generation will find in his songs a mirror to their own hopes and struggles. And through it all, Jimmy Cliff's life teaches us that art, when rooted in truth, has the power to endure, to heal, to connect, and to transcend time itself. As we close this chapter, we honor not just the music but the man behind it, a visionary, a storyteller, a beacon of hope. Jimmy Cliff reminds us that one voice, carried with courage and conviction, can change the world. That one dream, nurtured with persistence and heart, can inspire millions. That love, expressed through song, can ripple across continents, leaving a mark that will never fade. Thank you for journeying with us through the life of Jimmy Cliff. Your presence, your attention, and your care make this channel what it is. A space where legends live, stories endure, and hearts connect. Subscribe, share, and continue walking this path with us. Together we celebrate life, honor greatness and keep the music alive. Your support means more than words can express, and for that, we are deeply grateful.